September 21st. This meeting of the Westborough School Committee is called to order. Please stand if you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for joining us this evening. It's good to see people here. I'd like to notify everyone in the room with us tonight that this meeting is being recorded by Westborough TV. School committee meetings are available for remote viewing or listening on Westborough TV's government channels Verizon 28 and Charter 192, and online on the Westborough TV YouTube channel. Thank you to Westborough TV for covering the broadcast tonight. We have with us tonight Superintendent Amber Bach, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Daniel Mayer, Director of Finance and Administration David Gordon, Vice Chair of the Westborough School Committee Steve Durrett, School Committee members Stephen Batchelor, Kristen Vincent, Raghu Nandan, our Student Representative and Liaison Aratrika Ghosh, Recording Secretary Jen Benton, and we have staff from Westborough TV here. And I'd like to personally welcome everyone sitting in front of us and those watching from home. So the agenda for this evening is as follows. We'll begin with an approval of minutes or amended minutes from September 7th regular session meeting. Then hear from Superintendent Bach with the superintendent's report, followed by the assistant superintendent's report. Then we'll hear from the Director of Finance Administration's report, continuing the meeting with the school committee member reports, followed by the building project updates. We will then potentially hear from some citizens during citizens' requests, then an update on the district's fire recovery plan, followed by information about emergency shelter placement coming to Westborough. Soon thereafter, we'll be discussing and voting on the fall town meeting warrant article that we were discussing last time. That brings us to the redistricting study process on our agenda. And we'll continue with Amber walking us through her goals for the 2022-23 school year. I'll then bring our school committee up to date on the new Massachusetts Association of School Committees 6 resolutions that we will be reviewing this evening and voting on next time. And finally, we'll enter into an executive session and then adjourn for this evening. So let's begin with an approval of amended minutes from September 7th, 2022 regular session. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? I'm just going to remind, under the Italy trip, the cost should read $3,600, which it does say on the minutes, but our meeting ended when that was changed. So I just want to mention it verbally. And then the last sentence of the discussion of the town meeting warrant article, it should say, Ms. Edinburgh said the difference should come out of the next budget so that the settlements that are not needed in budget FY24 are removed from the total. And under the motion of the same section, the last sentence, Ms. Edinburgh commented that we can vote on this motion tonight and then we could vote again on the next meeting, should read, Ms. Edinburgh commented that we can vote on the current motion before the board that has been seconded and vote accordingly so that instead we vote on this warrant article at the next meeting on September 21st. If the vote is a no vote result, then that's what would happen. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I see a vote of 4 in favor, 1 abstention, 5 being present, because Raghu was not attending the last meeting. We'll move on to the superintendent's report. Amber?
Thank you. Good to see everyone. I feel like I might be battling Aratrika for the report updates, because I know this time of year, your list probably picked up a lot with everything that's going on. So between us, I would rather wait, and usually you and I should confer to make sure I don't take any of your items. So if we miss any, I'll add them afterwards. But I have a couple of highlights to share tonight, and I'll leave the good ones for her. One of our favorites, though, and unique, was that today we held our PTS reception. That's Professional Teacher Status Reception. Faculty who joined us 3 years ago, who from across the district have now achieved the benchmark of being invited for a return to a more permanent status as professional teacher status, giving them kind of a recognition of the fact that they have met many of the important benchmarks of developing the skill set, the working knowledge, and the commitment that what we look for in Westborough faculty. So today it was really enjoyable. I just want to particularly hold up this reception. It was 25 faculty that were receiving that recognition today, and they're a particularly unique group. If you think about the trajectory of their hiring, we hired them in the year and welcomed them and looked forward to training them, and then in March, before they could close their first year, we sent them home. And this is a group that have traveled through COVID with us as brand new faculty. And I think about how hard attaining professional teacher status is in terms of developing your identity, meeting performance benchmarks, and developing a collaborative nature with all of your colleagues before you kind of attain that invitation. And this whole team really suffered the kind of double. They didn't have the deep relationships yet that many faculty drew upon during COVID, if you think about kind of what that feels like. So today was an opportunity for us to really thank them, to acknowledge that, to recognize the group, and it was really enjoyable. They represented a wide array across the whole district, across all subject areas, and it was a pleasure to welcome them to our faculty. Another important piece, we had open houses that are, underway and active, and always an enjoyable part of a return to having those in person. I know Mill Pond has another one tomorrow. The high school one will need to be rescheduled, and I know people have asked about that, and the faculty is working to find a date right now. I know that Principal Brian Callahan was looking to announce that as soon as possible. And then last week, as you know, I was able to attend the select board, and I'll talk about that further in terms of the content when we get to talking about the warrant article. But I just want to acknowledge that it feels really productive and meaningful to be in a community where the integration of the boards and the collaboration and the relationships work effectively. Select board and FinCom, school committee, and all of the other boards, collaborating effectively around complex decision-making. I think it feels good to be a participant in it, even if it's a struggle around aspects of kind of what the decision-making needs to be. So I just want to provide an acknowledgement about my respect for just the boards and the working colleagues that I have on the municipal side of this work as we develop a vibrant community. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I think the last piece is, I don't know if any of you will speak about Westborough for Life. That was last Sunday. And I certainly will just say that Westborough Connects hosted a really vibrant event on the 11th. And I'd say there were over 350 people that they clocked us coming in. There were 40 exhibitors. There were funtivities there that had like pickleball and badminton and line dancing and all sorts of really great opportunities for people to sample what it is to kind of stay in Westborough. And I think it was really exciting and enjoyable. We had 4 mini courses that went off very effectively on composting in your home and recycling. We did a really meaningful one on Westborough history, and all of those were well attended. They had one on healthy farm-to-table living, and that was from Nurse Farm. and one about aging in place, which was a really vibrant opportunity. They looked at the resources in our county and area and in community, where as you age, the types of different services you need and providing information for people. So just a really vibrant day for Westborough. Just a shout out to the number of organizations that came and set up the expo to showcase opportunities for people to be engaged in the community. So I think it was really very enjoyable. So congrats to everybody who hosted that. It was really fun. So that's my report for tonight.
Thank you very much. Daniel, do you have something for us?
Yeah, a couple things. Good evening. I wanted to give you an update on two items. One, you may recall last year we started piloting doing a universal screening for mental health purposes of our students. We did it at the high school and we also did it at the middle school, where it basically was set up so that you could screen all the kids within a couple of hours, have counselors on hand to then look at they take a quantitative kind of quick survey. Then the data is immediately tabulated at the same time that they're taking the survey in a back room where our counselors are. They identify the students that are at risk for depression, anxiety, or other mental health concerns. And then we interview the kids that show up within that. It's like a half day. We're immediately touching base with them and having some discussions with the professionals. And so we decided after doing this last year, we did it in the fall with a high school class. I think it was our 11th graders last year. And then we did in the spring, the 7th graders. So we decided to expand it this year. We know how to do it now. We partnered, you may remember, with Riverside Community Health, also Youth and Family Services. And so today we did the 7th grade, so we're fairly new into the school year. We did it last March, so we used what we learned last March to do it at the front end of the school year. And next week we're going to be over at the high school doing a similar screening with the 9th graders. We thought the transitional grades were really important to get. So how are they doing just coming up from Mill Pond and just coming up from Gibbons? And so we had 18 counselors on hand that were there during the screening. Over 270 students were screened. Out of the 270, we identified 9% of those students that needed follow-up conversations. So the follow-up conversations, basically it puts them on the radar to have discussions to see if, the level of concern that in terms of the initial report on paper, and then we obviously would be in touch with parents if we feel like it warrants. I think it's a wonderful program that's been put in place. It's nice to see the collaboration between all of our counselors. So I just thought you'd be interested in hearing about it. The other update I wanted to give you is the entire school system will be engaged in the same professional development activity on Friday, which has to do with issues of how do we create a more inclusive environment for all. You may remember last year, Liza Tullison is a consultant who is very widely known, came to the district, electronic through Zoom. She Zoomed in and did a workshop with our teachers last year. Teachers felt like they got a lot out of her presentation, so we're replicating, with another workshop with a slightly different focus. The same thing on Fridays. So for 2 hours, all of our faculty would be breaking into groups that are going to be about 40 different groups that are chaired by different members of the community and engaging, listening to a presentation by Liza, and then engaging in discussion about the topic. Those are my 2 updates.
Thank you. Dave, do you have something for us?
Good evening. I just have a little bit of recognition. I wanted to talk a little bit about transportation, but also with a shout out to our transportation coordinator, Cindy Crowley, who does a lot of work trying to manage, mitigate, offset resolve transportation issues. As everybody's well aware, there is a driver shortage, but I think it's a good thing to start to say that Westborough has fared very well compared to other districts. So I'm proud that, you know, our drivers are committed to our kids. Many drivers thrive and hope to be in Westborough because our kids are so great. So a little bit of shout outs there, but I also wanted to kind of thank the community for their patience. You know, we're not at 100%. We may never be at 100%, but we are, we're doing very well. And I know it can be difficult, especially if your child is feeling some of the impacts redundantly, or they, you know, feel like it's targeted, and that's not the case. We are doing the best we can. So I also want to say thank you and, you know, give the community a shout out for just their patience as we work through this. And we're continually doing things within the district to basically do our own recruiting and retention of drivers. We post flyers. We talk to some staff to see if they have some, you know, capacity within their workloads to see if they can drive for us. So we are working as aggressively as NRT to see if we can continually build a bench where we can have substitute drivers and drivers ready at any point. Again, I think for me, just to summarize, it's a shout out to Cindy Crowley. It's actually a big shout out to the community for their patience, and to say that we are continually working on it and that we will continue to do so until we are hopefully at that 100% level, which we will work diligently to be at.
Today was extra challenging when you get a call from my voice at 6:30 in the morning saying that we had some delays with lines being down on Route 9. So the group did a great job to get kids there. So when I called both Mill Pond and the high school, it would have been their anticipated kind of arrival times. They had been able to get those students in. So really nice job today.
Okay, we're moving right along. We'll go right to Aratrika. Do you have a report for us this evening?
Yeah. I have mainly two things that I wanted to focus the report on, as there has been a lot going on in the high school. And the first thing is that there was assemblies, I believe on Monday, at our high school with all of the grades individually meeting, which went well. But there has been a lot of discourse at the school about the, enforcement of the dress code policy that was presented to us during the assemblies, and a lot of students had concerns that they believed that the dress code that there could be improvements made to the dress code, or they didn't agree with certain things, and they did exactly what they needed to do, and they talked to Mr. Callahan about it, and the whole administration was just really amazing at making sure that students really had an opportunity to meet with them and talk about what they were concerned about. And on that plan of action, the students have put together their own committee, and they plan to come to us and present their case. And I'm excited to hear that, and I applaud my peers for putting that together, because I think that's amazing. So hopefully we get to see that soon play out. And I also want to thank Mrs. Barrett, Ms. Mercandy, and Mr. Callahan for just being so open to hearing what we have to say as a student body. And I just think that's such an important part of Westborough High School that I really appreciate. The second thing I wanted to focus on is the project that I've been working on in the ELL department specifically. I was able to meet with our new ELL director, Ms. Broomfield, and kind of share some questions and concerns that I have about our ELL program. I was an ELL student when I was much younger, so a lot of my questions were, has there been improvement since then? And the overall big answer was yes. With both in district and state guidelines, there's been significant improvements to the ELL curriculum and testing, and just overall focus on getting students into regular English classes as soon as possible, which was so amazing to see. The the one project and concern that we are trying to address at the moment is the communication between teachers and students. And we're going to start at the high school in that respect, because there have been some students in the ELL department at the high school who have felt that they're being spoken to in a way that makes them feel like they're children and they're much younger, when in reality they're just trying to learn a new language. And Ms. Broomfield kind of agreed with me on that respect as well. And this is not to say that it's coming out of anything ill-intentioned. I think that all of the staff are doing incredible things for the department. It's just to say that there's maybe a way to improve communication between the students and their teachers. So what I'm doing is I'm partnering up with my friend Julia, who was also in the ELL department with me when I was younger. And we're going to put together a student forum with some of the students at our school in the ELL department to really hear from them firsthand, because obviously they would know best about any questions or concerns that they have. And then we're going to use that to inform any further if that be development training or whatever Ms. Broomfield decides is the best course of action to do with that. And I want to thank Ms. Broomfield, because she's just been so amazing at honestly everything that I spoke to her. I loved our conversation, and just making sure that we can get the best situation possible for these students, because I think one of the most distinct things about Westborough Public Schools is that it pushes kids academically in the best way possible. I've never walked into a class and not felt challenged, and I really want that to be the case for the kids in the ELL department as well, because they're doing something amazing. They're learning a second language, and I think that deserves to be celebrated and done in the best way possible. So that is something that we're working on. The plan, I guess it's somewhat tentative, is to do the student forum Tuesday after school. And then after that forum, we'll meet most likely that weekend with Ms. Broomfield again. From there, Ms. Broomfield will inform the next steps, whether that be putting in some kind of a training during a PD day, or whether that be meeting with the teachers, because I know she's been very active in terms of visiting the classrooms. But yeah, those are my two main updates, and that's kind of what's been going on.
Well, thank you very much. I am so impressed that there's a committee for the dress code. I think that is fabulous that you are empowering yourselves to make change. And I'm so pleased to hear that our high school is in that mode and really doing great things. And then thank you, Julia, and you for going out and...
Julio.
Oh, is it Julio?
Julio. Yeah.
Julio, and you are at it where you're going to create some positive change that you see where there's a problem, and really is fantastic. It sounds wonderful. Thank you for bringing it forward and doing the work that you're doing. Anyone else want to comment?
I just want to know if you want to share about homecoming.
Homecoming? Well, okay. Everyone's excited for homecoming. I can tell you that after having, COVID restrictions on such momentous occasions of high school, this homecoming seems really robustly planned, and just there's food trucks, there's events, there's, everyone's really, really excited about it. People have been participating in Spirit Week. I know I am very excited for Pajama Day tomorrow. So, overall, homecoming's been great. The ticket sales have been amazing. NHS has been mainly helping out in that respect, along with the class officers to sell those tickets during lunch. And and also for NHS, the current hour total is 1,745 hours.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, thank you very much. Steve, do you have anything this evening?
Oh, nothing tonight.
Okay, Kristen?
No, nothing. Thank you.
Raghu?
No, nothing tonight, thanks.
And Steve, Steve Durrett, do you want to wait until your building committee?
Yes.
Building updates? Okay, so I will just first thank you, Amber, for arranging the professional teaching status ceremony. It was really fantastic to celebrate teachers who are here in their 4th year, and it really was great. And I also thank Jacob Martin, the Director of Food Services, who set up a lovely spread for that celebration. It was lovely. It was great. He does a really impressive job. If you've not seen that. I also want to mention October 1st, at the Bay State Commons is the Westborough Cultural Council's Art in Common Arts Festival. It's fun, free, family-friendly, and a community event. It is from 11 to 5 at Bay State Commons. It's really, they're expecting like 50 artisan booths and lots of fun, and it's really a great community event for all. So another one is Turkey Trot that benefits initiatives in the Westborough Public Schools will be held on Saturday, November 19th at 9 a.m. And you can register today at westboroughturkeytrot.com. And then a reminder that Fall Town Meeting is Monday, October 17th at the high school at 7 p.m. And finally, also, the Armstrong Elementary School Book Fair is September 29th. That's all I have for this evening. We're going to move on to the building update. Steve, Durrett.
Well, as I mentioned last time, pretty much things I've been involved with are done. The sprinkler installation at Hastings is completed. We signed off on the final payment for that work, and it was accepted by the town, and the fire department has completed. Fails, of course, as anybody has been around, the grass is growing pretty well. There's a couple of patches of brown that eventually will get instant grass on them, based on what we bought anyway. And as I mentioned last time, the lower field will be reseeded in the spring, and hopefully we'll get a good catch in the spring for that. The remaining work that we are aware of at the site is the final pavement of the lower parking lot, which is supposed to happen on October the 5th, and the delivery of the shade structure to set on the completed foundations is sometime in the second week of December. Because it's a kit kind of structure, it won't disturb anything, and that erection will happen pretty much without bothering anybody. At least that's what we're told. Meanwhile, we're working through the paperwork. As the job is completed, eventually the paperwork associated with the final closeout with the Massachusetts School Business Authority will occur. On other projects, it took a very long time to do that, but the way this contract worked is that every time we would submit a bill of money spent, the state would return its percentage against that bill, so that we've been accruing the money from the state over time. However, the final accounting will be addressed, which is work that our owner's project manager is required to do. So that's pretty much the story for now, and we'll see how it all closes out, we hope, relatively soon. Thank you.
Did anyone have any questions for Steve?
I just wanted to add, I should have included this in my report, but while you were talking about grass, it reminded me. For homecoming, the administration has asked that no students wear high heels to the event because it might potentially cause damage to the turf and the tennis courts. But yeah, I should have added that during my report. I'm sorry.
I appreciate you adding that now.
Oh, that's good.
Thank you.
It's going to be cool tomorrow on Friday I hope people bring sweaters. Half the time when people come in their semi-formal wear, I feel like they're going to be cold. So it's going to be a really nice night for the dance.
Eve, I had a question about, you said that Fails are paving the lower parking lot on the 5th?
October 5th.
Yeah,
October
right
5th.
now, there's a base course in it. There's the final finished pavement necessary.
Is that where the buses come in?
Yeah, well, it won't bother anybody
Yeah.
in the sense that the timing would probably occur. If it happened on a school day, it would happen after school, because the effort to do it won't take very long. It's more of a logistics problem, getting all the stuff there at the right time. If otherwise, it has to be on a different day for whatever reason, it would be done on a Saturday.
And I had a question about the geothermal wells, all solved?
Yep.
Okay.
For those who remembered, I guess, our last discussion about those, which was probably near the last meeting of the school year, where we were was the fact that the air conditioning system was delayed, and that required some work on the fluids that were in the system. We basically got removed all the initial fluids that were put in the system, and it's fresh water in there now. So what needs to be done is that the both sides of the system, that is the in-house circuits as well as the geothermal well circuits, need to be charged with antifreeze and an anti-corrosion inhibitor. And that's sort of where we are, and various negotiations with the players is ongoing as to, first of all, what had happened, and we had spent a lot of time in the spring and in the summer figuring out what had happened and what the replacement fluids had to be. We had a lot of help from the chemical engineers that work for the town's water treatment plant. We discovered what the problem was. Those fluids have been removed, and at this point, there's a process that it will be done by the subcontractor who did it the first time. And in fact, we had a discussion about that process today and whether or not the school would be affected in terms of attendance. At this point, we don't think so. But on the other hand, we need to get this done before there's frost in the ground, because otherwise the fluid in the system is just water right now. So there's been some very interesting discussions with all the players to make sure this gets done. I'll report on it in the future, I guess, as we get to the final discussion and the final work.
And the solar panels, are they all up and running?
Oh, yeah, they have been up and running since last November, actually. What I've been waiting for is the latest bill from National Grid, and having talked with David, we found out we didn't get the last bill.
So just the update is that they read the meter this week on Monday. We called Tuesday, Wednesday, and Tuesday and today. We have figures as to the potential credit. We don't have the actual bill, which will likely be, I'll be able to present to Steve on Friday. I'm not really sure as to how they do it or the timingness of it. This bill will actually cover August 15th through
September 14th.
September 14th,
like that, yeah.
yes. So they read it, apparently they read it at a specific time, which is kind of slower than what we'd like to kind of follow credits and things of that nature.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about it is that we get a bill almost immediately at the end of the period from National Grid when we owe them money. But when we don't owe them money, it's amazing. They won't tell us how much the credit is. But it should be fairly large. And what we're trying to figure out is how much that credit might be annually, so that part of the thing about net metering is that we're allowed to credit another meter that exists in the National Grid system, which means any other meter that the school system pays for can be credited with the money that we're making, so that it doesn't just sit there like money in a savings account that you're not going to spend. And there's various things that we might do, but the bottom line is how we can use that to the best benefit of the school district. And again, there's two other credits involved besides just the payment for the energy delivered. The first one is a solar energy credit, or REC, a REC, which is a renewable energy credit, and that has dollar value, which is also payable to the school district. And the second one is the credit that National Grid offers as a result of having installed the system. It's a relatively small amount of money, but it's there, and they've acknowledged that, in fact, they owe it to us. So, there'll be more reports on how this is all working out. But When I was watching the performance of the system day to day, the design is 400 kilowatts worth of energy in that system out of roughly 270 panels. And we had peaked out probably 3 or 4 days during the summer when we had basically 100% sunshine, which meant the system was delivering everything that it was supposed to. And at this point, it was also designed to give the maximum power in the winter rather than the summer by how it was set, what angle it was set at, again, to maximize the value of our investment for the school as it's been occupied, mostly during the fall and the spring. So,
That's
I mean,
good.
those are just things that have happened in there.
Well, thank you for keeping on it, and Dave and you after looking for the bill. But no, it gives people a good perspective about the net zero plus building that was built at on Vail's grounds.
Yeah, and
Very
I guess
exciting.
there's one other thing that I should include, and that is that we also designed the system to report to us, that is the owner, exactly what the system's doing so that we don't have to rely on National Grid's process by which they tell us how much we made. So there's a check on what they do.
They do. Well, thank you. That is exciting. I do love that. And it gives everyone in town a better sense of what's happening there. So we're going to move right on to citizens' request on schedule. As a reminder, we have a policy regarding citizens' requests. Some important pieces of this policy include that you must be a current resident of Westborough. Speakers are allowed to address the school committee about issues within the school committee's purview. That would be like school committee policy or budget. Each speaker will be allowed up to 3 minutes to speak to the school committee. Written comments longer than 3 minutes may be presented to the presiding chair before or after the meeting. You are welcome to hand me additional comments in writing now or send them via email, and I will share them with the other school committee members. Public comment by residents at this meeting is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between individuals and the school committee. It is an individual's opportunity to express an opinion on issues within the school committee's authority. Our role is to listen carefully to what you have to share with us tonight. Clapping, cheering, calling out, or any other noise following a speaker is not allowed. A reminder that if not following the policy or disruption, this may cut into your time. Additionally, I want to remind members of the school committee that when making a point of order, please address your concern to the chair initially rather than to the speaker. The chair has the right to have participants register in advance so that session time limits can be applied and so that participants can be called upon in an orderly manner. Is there anyone here tonight that wishes to make a statement to the school committee? Mr. Conklin, please come forward and please speak into the microphone, state your name and address.
Boyd Conklin, 8 Water Street. So I see the memos that we're getting from the school district about vaccines again, pushing the vaccines, letting everyone know about the Northborough Clinic and how everyone should be getting vaccines as per, of course, the state and the federal guidelines. Anyways, there's a number of countries like Denmark, I think they've outlawed it for under 50-year-olds, and I think the UK now is not allowing anyone under 17 to get it. Perhaps one day it will be illegal in the United States. That day is not yet. But anyways, you guys keep pushing it. I wanted to mention the Florida House of Representatives Parental Rights in Education bill, commonly known as that horrific thing of don't say gay. Requiring district school boards to adopt procedures to comport with certain provisions of law. And so perhaps if the school committee can't give parents rights, perhaps maybe the town of Westborough and through the town meeting procedure can possibly do such a bill as this locally here. So some of these things are regarding the upbringing and control of their children in a specified manner, prohibiting the procedures from prohibiting a parent from accessing certain records, providing prohibiting a school district from adopting procedures or student support forms that prohibit school district personnel from notifying a parent about specified information, or that encourage or have the effect of encouraging a student to withhold from a parent such information, prohibiting school districts personnel from discouraging or prohibiting parental notification, involvement in critical decisions affecting a student's mental, emotional, or physical well-being, prohibiting classroom discussion about sexual orientation or gender identity in certain grade levels, and in this Florida bill, it's K through 3, or in a specified manner, requiring certain training developed or provided by a school district to adhere to standards established by the Department of Education, requiring school districts to notify parents of healthcare services and provide parents the opportunity to consent or decline such services, providing that a specified parental consent does not waive certain parental rights, requiring school districts to provide parents with certain questionnaires or health screening forms and obtain parental permission before administering such questionnaires and forms.
So sorry, that is the end of your 3 minutes.
Very good,
But if
thanks.
there's anything else you wanted to add, you can always send us an email, or you can hand us any other notes. Thank you. Is there anyone else here for citizens' requests? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, the fire recovery plan. We have a verbal update from Amber.
Thank you. I want to begin again by recognizing and applauding the coordination of our town fire department and firefighters working collaboratively with the Westborough leadership team to respond really effectively. And I think really good teams, it's not just within the moment, it's the work that happens afterward as well. So after you've had an experience where there's damage in a building, especially municipal buildings and large buildings that are occupied, there's a series of things that need to happen. And I just want to report are happening effectively and smoothly. There are insurance companies that need to come in and walk the site with all of the important parties there to take notes and to discuss the parameters of concerns and the areas that need to be repaired. I think one of the most essential and important things to report is that the cleanup and the report of air quality and habitability of all of those rooms comes out at full occupancy capacity, and there's no damage that is there's no loose tiles that would be a tripping hazard, as an example, where they would shut a room down and not allow entry until they could do emergency tile replacement. Our rooms, because we were able to get the cleanup so quickly and effectively done, have not suffered damage that's occurred at that level that quickly. So at the benchmark, all the rooms have been very effectively clean, air quality tested, and on Monday were reopened for use to faculty to return to their teaching spaces. Having completed the opportunity for those students and teachers to move back into their regular rotation, we now will develop a repair cycle, and the insurance company and all the companies that come in and do that work are now putting together a proposal plan for the most expedited and effective manner to come in and do repair, long-term repair, allowable and important through insurance, to the spaces that were impacted by water or by smoke. So that will involve painting, extracting and reinserting new roof tiles in certain areas, taking up all floor tiling, doing and floor edging, the stairwells in the areas all getting redone. Those will most likely take a 2 to 3 week window. I anticipate that they will block those for winter break, but we're waiting for them to give us a work, timeline and time frame, and whether or not they could do both floors in that time, or they would do one and then do the next at another break. So I want to say that the team that's working on it was very easy to work with, very collaborative. I'll keep you updated when we get that timeline, and we'll do a release of clear information to families. I mean, the student experience runs smoothly. I think the impact when you look at that ends up being on faculty, and we want to get them back. It's good that they're back in their regular rotation for now. Their schedule's stable, and then we'll get them information on repair that I will then share with you as well. So again, I just want to acknowledge the collaboration of all the municipal parties with the insurance companies and repair groups. And I'd be happy to take any questions, but it's really, for now, I think, really good news that, our repair is looking to be doable within this school year and in a time that won't have as much impact as it might have.
I had a question about the 2 days that were missed due to the fire. It would have to be added in back before the first semester ends, right, for the report?
It has to be made up within the school year, within this
Okay.
school calendar year. So I can feel your little senior brain working on that already.
We're making sure all seniors have to have
Yeah,
those
we were
days.
making sure we don't leave you out. Right now, Dr. Mayer is working with the state on what our viable options are, and our hope is to be able to give you that he can provide an update of hopefully a workable plan to make up the time by our October 6th meeting.
Okay.
Good question.
Thank you. Yep. Does anyone else have a question from the committee?
No, but a lot of people have asked that question.
Yes.
Yeah, I know,
Yes,
the
they have.
popular, I always save the popular question for Artrika to ask me.
Yeah.
People were wondering. It wasn't just me.
I love that, I know, I appreciate you asking.
So we're going to move right along to our next agenda item, emergency shelter placement.
So I thought this would be a more substantial meeting with some more substantive presentation of kind of a pending opening of an emergency shelter for individuals inclusive of potential families in our community. And so I want to provide a general update now, as it looks like the timeline has extended. So last week I was brought into some emergent conversations at the state level where they are currently looking across multiple communities at their capacity to create emergency sheltering, as they've seen an increase in refugees and people relocating into the area and needing assistance for relocating and getting settled. The state mechanism to do emergency shelter is a framework that parallels some of the work they might do with supporting homeless families in some manners. It's short-term emergency housing, but short-term looks anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months, as you think about the trajectory of settlement and then looking to have families move to areas where they can acquire permanent housing and work and different things. And that's a longer kind of wraparound service quality of planning that the state wants to be able to provide. They're looking at the reason that Westborough was one of their early calls was that they're looking, I think they're leveraging looking in places where they own state property. So they're looking to properties that that are theirs, that they have access to, which is really a logical framework. So they have some properties in the community that they felt could be retrofitted and made to accept emergency housing. And so they contacted us to give us kind of an early warning kind of to prepare. Beyond that, now that the window looks like it's extending, and I think they're starting from looking at the framework of the housing in terms of capacity first. If it passes a hurdle, then it would escalate and pick up pace. I think they would anticipate we could receive up to 20 families, and we would be looking to then look for a mechanism to stabilize them in school and provide what we need to for public education. I think there would be a variety of things that would, entail us being responsive for that, and dependent upon age, placement, all sorts of things. But it's not good to spend time on projecting. As I get real information and real data, I will bring it to you with a workable plan and a responsive way to move forward. That involves the town on all sorts of the keyboards, the fire, the police, the town manager, social services, anybody we can pull together in that working group. So they reached the right people initially to let us know, and then we're kind of getting some early coordination together on the municipal side of talking through what our questions and lists, and it's still really up at the state level, the discussion. So I just wanted to give you kind of a 10,000-foot warning view update on that and let you know, certainly we feel like, whatever that capacity is, it would be expected that we would find a way forward. And if it comes into fruition, we'll make it work.
Question. Steve?
I would assume if we're talking families, potentially we're talking about children as well. And I would assume that we have an obligation to accept those students into the school system should they arrive here.
Yep.
And I guess the next question everybody's going to ask, what kind of support is there believed to be available from the state for that added cost to the town?
So again, 10,000-foot view, those are certainly questions that I provided early on, and I think there would be some layers of support provided. I think the social service framework support wouldn't fall necessarily on our side of the parameter. That'd be kind of a state framework working with different groups. Financially, I think there would probably be some supports provided, potentially for some transportation offsets, things like that. So very early days, though. And again, it kind of, it depends. Also, you get, it's age, location, language needs. Like, you have to look, can those disperse across district and get absorbed across the skill set of our current delineation and planning for the year. So, I'm kind of doing like kind of model projections to a certain extent, like where I would place kids in. But when you don't have enough information, it's really an effective time to put my time and energy into that yet until I have age and placement information isn't really useful. So I know what I have to do and what we need to do should that come to fruition. I just don't want it to surprise you when you see it on the docket again. If it does, you'll assume that we'd be moving forward with more information. They didn't think, for example, Steve, that all those families would come at once, like boom. It would be kind of an in and out. It would be, you might receive 4 families and then another 3, and they would be staging them in potentially. So those are some of the preliminary pieces, and I think I certainly, all of us are asking the right questions, at the state level and some at the local level, and I'll keep you guys updated.
I have a question. Is the acceptance of these placements obligatory or optional?
I mean, I think that as a public entity, and when the state places students in a space they own, should they choose to make that an emergency shelter, those families would have access to the services of the community in which they live, framing the same process of residency, right? So it follows the same, I framed the beginning of the conversation by saying it follows some of the same parallel frameworks of how homelessness is managed. If you have a student and a family or a placement that is a homeless placement and they're given temporary housing in your town, that is a residency framework where the services and obligations of public education are made available to those families. So it would follow that same trajectory. The expectation was, I was brought into the call because should families be in the community with us, the expectation would be that we would provide public education to them.
So the properties that you mentioned that the state owns, these are residences, or this is just real property?
It's property with buildings on them, and they would require conversion. And I think that's where the trajectory of a potential change in the discussion is certainly happening up at the state level. So that's why, again, I don't want to get too far into discussion where I create any confusion. I'm not going to, I can't give information I don't have. But in the basic framework, it was logical that they're looking in communities and they own property and buildings, throughout the state. And so they're looking in that framework logically as a place that they have access to do their own reno and repair and work on, to make them accessible in the way that they see fit, as long as they meet building codes and things like that. So again, I think it's like any other form of housing. When somebody has an opportunity and an ownership, they get occupancy and the services that are then entitled against that residency.
Thank you. And as a reminder, people who live in Westborough, when they have kids, we welcome you. We welcome you all. So we'll move on to our next agenda item. It's the fall town meeting warrant article that we discussed last time, and a reminder that we had a split vote. The motion was on the $762,264, and the split vote the motion did not pass. So, Amber, did you want to walk us
Sure.
through it
So
once
thank
again?
you. So tonight, I think the action before us, and Dina, why don't you pull up the one that's, so we have an article that was originally submitted that is kind of the starting place for this discussion. Can you click on the next slide for me and pull up the next one? And that will frame the discussion. I think our charge tonight is to vote a final number and the delineation of how we might designate the opportunities for funding of that total number. And I want to begin by again acknowledging the collaboration of the boards. I think you're robust, and Raghu, you weren't here, and so it led to this split vote, which caused a unique opportunity for a wide array of really dynamic discussion. So while we missed you, I have to say the opportunity for the board to really engage, and the split vote was just kind of a nice distinctive memory of something that doesn't happen here that often because we usually have a full board, and but the quality of discussion was very high end, and the target was that the essence of that discussion was that it was important for us to move beyond this board and to seek the open conversation of the full range of numbers available and the why for all of those with these other boards in town, because we all share the responsibility of an impacted change in a budget. So we went and spoke to FinCom. We spent about an hour and 20 minutes with them with a really in-depth discussion of quality look at what was the rationale by which we had a budget deficit, what were the experiences of that, how do we manage tuition out costs. It was really in depth. You could watch that as, light viewing while you're on the plane to India tomorrow if you wanted. It was a really good quality discussion. And so from there, we then went to the select board and had an extended kind of additional range of questions. So what I would like to do tonight is step you through what I would make as a final, I think my thinking on a final recommendation. Dave and I have been talking about this in depth. I think he agrees with my rationale, and I'm going to step you through it, and then it comes to you as a board to make a decision. So the most important thing to recognize is that a bill will and has arrived for a cost of the current FY23 budget that we are in, for which we do not have a funding allocation. Therefore, we're going back to the town to seek additional fund for the implementation of the FY23 budget. The total that we're going to talk about tonight of all of that impact is the $929,352 that you see at the bottom of your screen, the total unanticipated costs. Those costs are basically a total, and again, it's nice to have Raghu. We can target our summary to him because I'm hoping it's succinct enough that it makes sense. We had 8 students who went out of district after voting our FY23 budget and the end of the year. That was the $539,000 of allocated tuition. We then, beyond that point, had a 9th student go out that is currently also encumbered and out of district for a total of $628,833 of encumbered tuition for students that are out of district already actively during this school year. We then also looked at 2 students who are anticipated to go out November 1st. At the time when I brought these 2 students here at the last discussion, one of them was a higher number because we thought that they weren't going to, we thought they were going to go out September 15th. Their actual transition date is anticipated now to be the same as the other student. Both of them placed out November 1st, and so that one number has been reduced. It was a charge of the school committee and of FinCom and of select board to get a harder number on those 2 students and a kind of a more firm discussion of what their outplacement date was anticipated to be. And that is current, as you see right there. The total of those 2 additional students is $167,88,000. So The total anticipated cost for students 1 through 11 is the $795,921. We then have 2 settlement agreements for students as a one-time cost for working with families around a collaboration of different planning for their ed plans and their needs as students for their tuition-based needs. Those settlements are there. That's a one-time cost, and that one-time cost is a total of $133,431. So those are the chunks of number that give you the total for the $928,352. Now, we've had this discussion a couple times. I think it's good to have it and have a kind of a rolling through the numbers and have a chance to understand the complexities of those different pieces. The part that I want to go through, and I'm just going to open up my numbers up close for me here, sorry. So when you look at these numbers, I think I have 2 pieces, which is, thank you, did you resort those for me?
How it was on the sheet.
I want to look at the numbers in 2 chunks and make a recommendation. And he was resorting the money for me. What I'm thinking, and I looked at this, listening to the feedback, there was one area of core discussion that I think leads to me making the recommendation that I'm going to make, which is that the most core discussion happened around students 10 and 11, because our general practice is, as we do for student allocation and through other things, that we only budget for students that are in our seats, known allocations, encumbered costs. These are anticipated for November 1, which is several weeks after the town meeting date. Therefore, they're not yet encumbered and known costs at the time of town meeting. And so I've elevated my thinking on that I would like to put in front of you as a proposal and ask you to think about that. The most important thing is that we need the total amount in whatever allocation combinations that we request to be paid so that we can pay the bill. I would like to make a recommendation that we break the allocation into 2 numbers. I'm going to recommend that we request students 1 through 9 be paid for raise and appropriation for $628,833. I then believe that in alignment with our practices and the feedback we received from the boards, that the 2 students, 10 and 11, who at the time of the vote on town meeting floor will not have been encumbered costs yet, but are anticipated, that we would ask for that allocation as a one-time ask from free cash, along with the settlement agreements in free cash, which would cluster those 2 numbers together to the total we need. We would in effect be requesting $300,519 from free cash, which would be in effect students 10 and 11 and the 2 settlements from free cash. And we would ask for the $628,833 from raise and appropriate, because it's current budget costs that are ongoing costs, as those will be reoccurring year over year. Just as when you settle a contract, those costs are budget allocations that are ongoing. So I believe that it brings us to town meeting that speaks to the process that I believe Steve pushed us towards and what your discussion pushed us towards, which was going to the board so that they could give us feedback and we could hear their thinking. I'm summarizing that thinking to you. How you allocate this money is your vote and your right to bring forward, because you'll have to carry it to town meeting. But I believe that captures the range of conversation as responsible to the processes we have used in the past, and would thus lower the tax impact to the best possible number we could bring forward of the $628,833 to fall town meeting. So I'd like to hand it back to you for discussion. I think those, Dave, do you have other pieces that you think we need to add?
No, I mean, she's concise as possible, so no.
I think that would be my recommendation to you. I think for those of you, and you're all adept at this, I would open it up for you to do the conversation and move it forward from there. Thank you for listening.
Steve Durrett?
Yeah, I'd like to make that as a motion, the raise and appropriate $628,833, and the other total was $300,000.
300,015.
519.
300,015.
500.
As my
I'm
motion.
sorry, yes.
And I'd like to speak to the rationale of it.
Second.
Thank you, Steve.
Discussion. Sorry.
My interest in doing this, I think, is, as we discussed at the last meeting, but I just wanted to make it clear to people in the room as well as the voters of the town. This is a necessary payment irrespective of where the source of money is. It will come out of the budget of the school committee whether we add another nickel to our budget or not. If the town meeting does not vote this sum total, what happens is that in fact the service is required and the bill will arrive and that will have to be paid, which means that the difference between what the town voted in March and the services anticipated for that total are now going to be reduced by this total of 929,000. So these people who are included in this summary will get the services that the state has mandated that they will get. However, the rest of the school budget will be affected by that shortfall. And that will occur in many different ways. But as we have talked about before, since the school budget is roughly 83 to 85% salaries, even if we could make up the 15% of this total, that in fact the salary budget would have to bear the cost. And so I think that information to the town is super important because this expense not only happens now, but we can anticipate it'll happen every future year as well, as long as these students are in the system. And so the real vote here is whether or not we impact the rest of the services that the school department delivers. And that's the reason why I make the motion in the amounts that are shown. Thank you.
I want to remind, thank you, Steve. I want to remind people who, I don't know if you all watched this select board meeting and the AFC meeting when they were discussing this. There wasn't a lot of opposition to the whole concept that this is needed. There were members of FinCom who asked some really good questions. It seems split between the two numbers that we were discussing last time. Select board seemed to be talking about you have to ask for what you need. Another member of select board asked if it could move, there could be more that could come from cash, free cash, as someone said. And then there were a lot of good questions from select board. Some of the same questions we've been asking. So it gave you a sort of a sense that there wasn't anyone who was saying this can't be done. You know, it didn't sound like the recommendation was against. It was about where does it come from and, you know, where do we go from there? Are there other comments from our school committee?
Yeah, I mean,
Raghu?
personally, whether we as a board or any other boards, whether we like it or not, this is mandated by the state. There's no escaping this expense. Question is, how are we going to pay for it? So that's the only question we are discussing here. I like the concept of going to the town meeting for 628,833 and getting 300,519, the rest of it from free cash. It is what it is at this point. There's no escaping this cost. We have to come up with this somehow or the other.
I heard what Raghu's just said. Just a reminder that the motion is for that number, but of course, people may disagree about that number, just because I'm bringing that up from our last discussion. So it's really two things. One is the amount, there's a motion, and how, which there's a motion of how in that motion. So keep that in mind, because if you disagree with the amount and the motion, or if you agree with the amount and the motion in terms of how it will be funded. I'm just keeping it organized. Thoughts from the side?
I support the motion. I like Amber's explication, and I like that it's been vetted, or at least it's been discussed through FinCom and Select Board, and I like the way that they're navigating it by having a portion of it come out of free cash, because I think that's what one of the reasons free cash exists.
You have some thoughts,
I
Kristen?
agree. That is why we have free cash, and that is taxpayer money that taxpayers have already paid for situations like this that come up. And just for my own understanding, the reason that we can use free cash for student 10 and 11 is because it's not a cost yet. Is that?
I think one of the things that is a responsibility, yes, the answer is yes. And I believe that the rationale for that, and you could make an argument either way, and we've had both arguments or discussions, is that one of the things we want to do is keep all of our arguments in the proper alignment of procedure for the ways that we justify all of our practices with clarity. And because that allocation is not yet at completion, I believe it's more appropriate to ask for the coverage from free cash, and that cost then. And then when we build the 24 budget, we would say, yep, they did go out. We covered that gap between now and when they went out, and now we have to build that into FY24. So, you would see that 167 come forward in FY24. When we do that gap statement, it would be the number we would carry. So, we would do that as part of our delineation. But when we build 24, we'll be doing a fresh, clean look at like all the kids out, all the kids in, and give a core number like we always do. But I certainly will bring it back at that time to remind you, because we give you a rationale and justification for all of those expenditures. So I just feel like it's, having listened to the discussions of the boards, it's a cleaner action.
Right, and that was my other part, is this will roll, student 10 and 11 will become part of our operating budget.
They will for 24.
But it makes sense to me the way it's included in the free cash with the settlement agreements. So thank you.
So I think that people will argue, based on what you said, that 10 and 11, students 10 and 11 are an operating cost, and typically free cash has not come from operating costs. And yet, we talked about last time at our meeting that we budget for what's in front of us right now, and those two will not be in front of us by October 17th. But the other thing that really comes to mind about this is it's less impact on the taxpayer. We're team players. We are a part of the town. For there to be less impact on our taxpayers seems like a fiscal responsible thing to do. And you can also then say the settlements are a one-time payment. That would fit along the free cash line as well. So based on what the boards said and the feedback we received, I definitely heard, a select board member saying, is there a way to bring up more free cash for this so that it would have less impact on the taxpayer? And so this would do that. So I'm in agreement of that as well. Is there any more discussion? Okay, I think we're ready for a vote. So the motion, I'm just going to remind people, is for the total of, the total is 920. Well, it's 929, 352, broken down to 628,833 to raise and appropriate, and 300,519 from free cash. And so what we vote on now, should it pass, would be the numbers that go into the warrant article for fall town meeting. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
That's a 5-0 vote, 5 being present. So we have our numbers for the warrant article for October 17th at 7 PM is the town meeting at the high school, just a reminder.
All
Well,
right, thank you.
thank
I
you
just want to
all.
say thank you, Amber and David, for your good work on running those numbers, but also for all of the town boards and representatives who listened very carefully and thoughtfully and weighed in on this. And I always appreciate their advice and guidance and just taking the conversation to get more ideas.
Yeah, a group effort in a
Yeah.
way that I think. So if it speaks to quality of good effort, we would hope to receive the voted support of FinCom and Select Board on the final article responsive to those discussions. And those votes for those two boards will be coming up between now and I forget when they actually vote. The warrant will close, I think, on the 23rd, and then they have additional time to vote between there and town meeting.
And I appreciate that you listened to those boards. They wanted concrete numbers, and when those became finalized, you had a new number, and it also took into account the discussion we had at our last meeting about the line in the sand as we talk about it, which is, what do we have right now, you know? So thank you for respecting that and respecting the boards. Okay, we're going to move right along to our next agenda item. It looks like we are ahead of schedule. The redistricting study process.
Thank you. So this is a memo just to provide a public record that is in our planning and to lay out for you what I think is the best current and effective thinking for moving forward in the next kind of 2 years ahead. So when we completed, with the completion of fails, there have been questions from people remembering that we had said we would potentially do some redistricting. It was part of the original 2015 study that we were looking at enrollment across the whole district and looking to expand our capacity to be able to successfully educate everybody in reasonably balanced class sizes and with an equitable and good experience across all of our schools. Working with you over these last 8 years, we've achieved the vast majority of that planning work. So one of the questions I just want to provide to our community is clarity around the timeline. So if you look at the strategic plan is carrying that work for us, it's outlined in the plan. This summer, I did some additional work with the 3 principals to go. One of the things we do in the summer is you take that strategic plan, you pull up the work list, you look at everything that falls in the timeline for 22, 23, or carryover from 21, 22, and you do your planning for the year ahead. And so in our summer work and in our fall work, looking at the timeline for this against what we currently know, I am making a proposal to adjust the current timeline, not the work that will need to be done, but just the timeline for a few pieces of it. So you can see I provided to you the goal statement as it was originally noted, and I've highlighted a couple areas for you. I'm going to shift the target on the X's for their implementation timeline, and I'm going to shift the language around engage the consultants, and I want to talk about that a little bit, as well as what the implementation start time would be should we need to do any redistricting. So what I would like to do is shift the timeline, and my rationale for it is this. The current, and I gave it to you in the memo, so I don't have to reread the memo for you. I know you all are good about preparing, but for those people at home who might not have looked at that, I want them to understand exactly where we are, which is the current enrollment of the 3 schools are stable within acceptable ranges, and there's not an urgent need to have to do any kind of immediate redistribution for the 23 or 24 school year. You remember, we do planning pretty far out. So all of the current schools have some capacity to absorb students while we thoughtfully begin a year of study to look at the long-term options to shift some streets or some small allocated reassignments if it were required. The recommended adjustments to the timeline would be as follows. I would explore consultants for support during the 23-24 school year if needed. So what I want to do is explore and then engage those consultants, thinking that should we need consultants to help us do any parts of the assessment, be it bus transportation assessments or housing updates, as an example, to look at the trajectory of additional housing that might cause any shift in allocation. I would like to be able to research with cost and potential need for that this year. And then we would utilize them during the 23-24 school year to help us draw final conclusions, and they would work with the subcommittee across the span of the year to give us information. That follows a trajectory of how we actually worked when we did the original enrollment assessment. You know, they worked, we established a subcommittee, we articulated our target needs. If we felt we needed help, we have some targeted consultation to come in and give us good information, which might be beyond our scope of knowledge, and then fold that into an active report that would be completed by the spring of 2024. And then any changes would happen 24, 25. So you get time to provide really well-fueled communication to people. You get inclusive opportunities for people to hear across the span of next year, lots of discussion as needed. We begin right now to kind of like say, here's the timeline. Here's when we would do it, and you give people a target. Implementation of 24, 25 with clarity so that they're not wondering, because people don't like to wonder about where their child will go to school. People who are going to buy homes will wonder, and that's a smaller segment for us to address. But importantly, implementation of 24, 25 feels like the appropriate window to make any substantive change should we need to. I would then form a committee in this spring, probably in April, bring them together and start to articulate the process with them. You would get updates from me around what I think the shape of that committee should be in terms of including whom. We would put out invitation, we would invite those we need, and pull together a workable committee to be able to begin through the summer and into the fall to do the work we need to do. I anticipate that I've already kind of laid out some of that in my head, and also in talking with the principals. I did redistricting in Wellesley when I had that experience there, so certainly have a sense about the importance of lots of communications with people, a sense of being included, and clarity on timelines. So I really wanted to make sure that fall of this year we can provide this. I would push this out in district after you've received it to be clear that this was an update that people need to know about so that it's shared actively. And then from there, we would be able to move forward. I believe this allows us time to really stay in relationship, to communicate effectively, and to plan ahead. I imagine the committee would be co-chaired by the superintendent and a school committee member and would include representation from all stakeholders. So that's the update that I wanted to provide for you. I don't think it requires a vote from you. This is workable action that I need to move forward on. It's a strategic plan that you've already voted. We live document update timelines all the time, and I give them to you as part of my report. I would certainly take your feedback and thinking if this feels in alignment with what makes sense to you to move forward, and we would do that.
So my one question is there a way to inform the real estate agents in our area? Just that there can be change, and...
No.
No.
Because you just don't know what and where. I mean, we deal with that all the time anywhere where people, and the answer is you're lucky to come to a community with 3 really amazing schools and you'll go to one of them. And I happen to live with a realtor and I say that to him often. Because, the trajectory of schooling in Westborough is that the 3 elementary schools are all dynamic, interesting, and all high performing and wonderful. And any of those will meet a family's needs. My own family was redistricted. We had that experience, and we went to Fales and Armstrong, and I have great kids. So I think, we really help people to understand that that's the process, and fretting about it, won't help people to get information more quickly. I did learn that from Wellesley. It's just an important process to be more than clear about and not try to give people answers to make them feel better. It just creates more confusion. So I want to stay in a clear crisp delineation, like when I said no, because it really helps people have clarity.
Any other questions, thoughts about this? Even the bus drivers wanted to know because they love their kids and they don't want to change.
I know.
But
You know, we might not require any redistricting. One of the things we're going to look at is the natural build out of some expected developments. You know, we've done really good work. Shout out to Steve Durrett and his work over the years with the enrollment study and the trajectory of planning, because all of our buildings do have capacity. And currently, the question is the natural grow out across all of those settings ready to absorb the growth in the town and might not require any moves at all? So, you know, you have a couple new developments with up to, I think, another 15 houses coming on that I think would go to fails, and that might well absorb the differential of what we would get in shifting a few streets. So again, you know, to be determined by a study of looking at it. We have a picture of that because we did some of that when we looked at what we wanted to do with enrollment. So, you know, I think we've got some good past work in the original study. We'll get some updates as needed and use it to make good decisions that have long-term. You know, it's people's inclination is to say, wait, this class is 2 kids bigger, let's shift. Because, you know, that's not how enrollment trajectory works. It's not how redistricting streets works. You know, you can move something that works for a year and then creates another new problem for you. So, you know, again, it's not something to be taken lightly. It's a committee that I would be anchoring thoughtfully, working with a lot of good people to make sure we do good decisions that have long-term quality stability for the town.
sounds like an important committee, and I'm sure hard work to get to that resolution.
You know, I love committees.
You do.
I am a committee person, so.
Oh, it's going to be a good one.
All right.
So, yeah, let's
That
move
is
right
the
along.
report.
We're heading to the superintendent's goals.
All right, so tonight's a first pass on the goals for you. I think, you know, I want you to look at them, you can think about them, and talk to me about them tonight. And then there's a couple things that I want to do with them. They say draft, because one of the things that I will do is I'm going to step you through them as a framework of where I think the emphasis of my energy will go this year. And then I will apply SMART goal data to them. They are supposed to be framed as SMART goals. So I'll take this is laid out the way you're used to seeing my goals. So I wanted you to look tonight at the content of my thinking around where I would put my energy. And then I will add data and timeline benchmarks to them. So I'll frame them with the components of SMART goals, where I will give you the data points and report opportunities on all of the things kind of relating to these areas. And I will add those, so it'll extend the document a little bit, and I want to think about how to set it up thoughtfully for you so it's not overwhelming to look at. Because, you know, I also use this document when I do the reporting to you for mid-year and end of year. So we try to keep everything cohesive for you and for me, so it's not cumbersome. So I guess I would open up the document and just step you through a couple core areas, and then take any questions. So I certainly just want to begin by saying, you know, for me, running a district is a large operation, and I lean on that strategic plan to create for me a framework to hold me in and to give me guidance. So, you know, it keeps us on track. For those of you that have been with me a long time, I'm clear that for me, it's just it's a giant lesson plan and a to-do list. And it's what I do to drive working with different committees and hearing from them and different leaders who are off doing amazing things in the district. And the strategic plan is just the roadmap of that work. I feel very good to be dug in on goals that feel fresh and targeted based upon that planning and really some robust work. So I'm feeling very energized around that. You know, our strategic plan is flexible and responsive to how we're doing. So each year we adjust it, and that will become part of the updates that I provide to you. I also group my goals by the 4 major standards of the evaluation structure. So under standard 1 for instructional leadership, my core piece this year will be to implement the strategic focus areas of teaching and learning and wellness and relationships, the stranded goals for 22-23. From there, we lifted, working at retreat and from the strategic plan, these core areas of focus for the upcoming year. We'll be working on supporting implementation of a really amazing professional development year. I'm very excited to have Daniel share with you what he's designed with really the extended leadership team across this district to really provide robust and engaging and targeted and personal PD work in the upcoming year. And I will be part of staying very close on that as both a participant, as a learner, but also as one of the leaders. I will also be working to sustain and extend the development of our DEI commitments, and they're embedded across all of our work of hiring and training and the PD that we're having on Friday, extended year over year to deepen that work. We will continue that. I'm lifting and very excited about the green initiatives, which are really outlined in the strategic plan, and I will be staying very close on those because there's no framework for them yet. And so typically those will be personally close frameworked goals with me, and then they get given away to lots of people once they're built. That would mean building curricular options to foster knowledge and discussions around climate change and global warming. I give that to Daniel, and he runs with that, thinking with the amazing teachers and how it folds naturally into curriculum. We would then be implementing composting district-wide and recommitting to strong recycling implementation practices. The preliminary work for that is underway and will become robust and obvious and targeted across the span of the year. We will also work to sustain implementation of our K-3 literacy work. If you read the Globe today, they were putting out information around mandatory screenings, and we're ahead of the curve as we like to be on stuff like that, and feel very, very good about the benchmark literacy assessment work that's happened K-3, and feeling really, really good about the work of our colleagues. We'll look to develop STEAM and makerspace experiences that are more cohesive and more articulated pre-K to 8. Some of that work is underway with different working committees, and we've got ideas around that we'll look forward to reporting progress on to you. And of course, we will continue to maintain our SEL programming. You heard about the mental health screening data getting deeper and more extended and more maintained, and the data cycles giving us the kinds of things that you asked for and that we wanted. All of that will be part of, again, this tiered work of the strategic plan in the upcoming year. And again, I'll attach the appropriate data points to you that you'll see in reports and updates that will give you information about how we're doing on that. Number 2, I will engage in district and meaningful supervision, coaching, and evaluation. We're really in a kind of a really neat cycle of Daniel and I having worked this summer with the extended leadership team to really start robust discussion around the co-planning and working with providing quality feedback that support faculty in the range of work that they're doing. And I think, again, that's exciting to work with the evaluation committee to review the proficient teaching practices and to collaborate on how they fold into supervision goals. And we started some of that work. Daniel ran a great meeting the other day where he developed a kind of a crosswalk on some of our PD for the year against the different areas of proficient teaching in the document. So we'll be updating you on that stuff in a way that I think you'll be very excited about. And we'll focus on developing strong, diverse teams and extended leadership models across the district. We have so many amazing teachers, and what we're really looking to is to innovate more opportunities for them to do PLC work and leadership opportunities and engagement around curriculum work that we think is very exciting for them to have the opportunity to do. So that incorporates the areas of focus where I'll be pulling from the 2 major focus strands as they relate to instructional leadership. Questions about those arenas. Do they feel like they reach on target for you? Those should feel like familiar discussions, like there shouldn't be any surprises there for you.
I have a comment though.
Yeah.
Program to encourage teachers to, I know it may not be possible always, but teachers to have less printouts and more Google Docs and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
because there's still a lot of printing going on. So would like to reduce,
I think that will be part of the strand of our green initiative work. And again, we want our teachers to be strategic about using print when it's a necessary choice and selection that works. And I think you'll see some changes in that. I think John Green and different people, we want to do some benchmarking. I would say some of that wouldn't happen until next year. It kind of falls more in phase 2, where we look at reduction and starting to kind of find ways to track that data to get excited about letting schools see that they can then reduce trash and use and waste. So first we start on effectively recycling the things we do using the programs that can and should be robust for us. And then year 2, and kind of looking at the trajectory of a 2-year implementation, would be more heavily around reduction and tracking some of those numbers so people can be motivated by kind of the decline of waste. So yes, in the trajectory.
it's like almost we're spending like $70,000 on printing, right?
It varies. I mean, again, we will always be within a framework still a paper industry. I mean, it is just a part of what you have to have in the modeling of instructional work. And what you want to know is that it's meaningful and purposeful, that there's not a lot of waste in it, that if it was printed, it was used effectively. And I think, that's certainly a part of work that I think is in, again, that stranded next phase.
I could be wrong, but I think your number includes the contract for the printer in each school, yeah.
Which we would always have to maintain. But I don't disagree with the inherent kind of goal of breaking it down. Yeah, definitely. Other questions on this general area of focus for me? Okay, so those feel on target. I'll give you benchmarks for them, and you should recognize them as kind of going deeper and further with some new things in there. Standard 2 for management and operations, again, drawing from the document that you'll use to evaluate me. I'll implement the new strategic plan related to a couple areas that are specific, which is, again, there's me in the targeted part of teaching and learning and wellness, but there's also me managing the paperwork, the reporting, and the trajectory of information that you need from me. So I will be working with people to get those targeted goals done. I will be working to provide communication to faculty, families, and the wider community about our work on the strategic plan, and I will maintain documentation and provide mid-year and end-of-year updates on our progress and benchmarks of the strategic plan. So that's kind of the management branch of doing that document, and I'm the only one who manages the trajectory of that document over time. Everybody's doing the dynamic work, that's not me, but one of my roles is to feed the mechanisms of kind of reporting it, tracking it, and kind of letting it be seen as a body of work. And that's what the strategic plan provides us. It's very concrete that way. But I am the person that's supposed to invest the time in that. I'll effectively manage the fiscal challenges and collaborate with all stakeholders. Continue to develop new conceptual approaches that the Director of Finance has visioned, complete new capital assessment to anchor the 5-year and then 10-year update, collaborate with the town and the school committee on the capital process to develop an effective long-range capital plan for the town and for the schools. That's underway, but it really needs another deeper pass and new updated work. We'll complete a successful negotiation with all units. We'll implement green initiatives with a focus on buildings and grounds collaboration and continue development and practices for hiring diverse and talented faculty. We'll track that data, increase tools for recruiting. So those are all management goals, and so I fold them under that arena for you. If you see things that are missing that you feel like I need to have urgent focus on, as you reread these, you can just give me feedback and I can add them in. Any questions on that arena? Okay. I mean, you don't have to have a response now. I just want you to understand the framework of what they are. Number 3, family and community engagement. I'll be looking at collaborating with town organizations to continue. This actually pulls the same goal from last year. because it has to be sustained, which is just renewing that work and staying connected. And renewing and enhancing communication to faculty and families, looking at some new ways to get back at talking about curriculum and learning and shifting away from the mechanics. So much of our communication was around mechanics of running the district and kind of operational management. And I'd like to get back into the kind of writing I was doing more in years like 3 and 4, where we were sharing more curricular information, more philosophical insights around our work, and kind of a different lens of a type of communication that Daniel and I would like to be able to do more of. You know, I value family and community engagement. I don't need to replicate the kind of work I do year over year. Like, you know, I'll be out in the community. Like, you don't need me to write that down. Like, you know, those are all things that are going to be part of that work that's important to me. Professional culture, it picks up some of that. I'll focus on goals around the authentic and connected relationship work. There's definitely repair work that feels really comfortable right now coming into the year, but I think really coming through negotiations successfully with good relationships intact, continuing to really rebuild deeper relationships with families, and spending more time with parents and parent voice and student voice is something that I really want to get back at around different topics more than that I wasn't doing that. Looking to rotate in some new community events and be more selective and kind of pick and choose some new things. And then looking again to cross communication over into the community more, which can be challenging, but looking for ways to do that, collaborating on some projects. And then of course this year it's in the strategic plan to update the website and look at our communication tools. As I've mentioned to you, I'm interested in assessing the Blackboard platform and innovating it to be more robust, and looking at the website. So those are the ones that are kind of like my core area of focus this year, as well as kind of all the other stuff that goes with this place. But, you know, those are the places where I will be focusing.
Can I just comment one thing about number 2B, which is the capital assessment to anchor 5-year plan update?
Yeah.
I'm someone who believes that we should have a much longer capital planning plan, meaning that when one roof is put up, you have the next roof in the plan that number of years later that it is known to be good for, so that you're always looking ahead, even that far ahead. Because if you don't put that in until 5 years before, it's sort of shocking.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think that's a good insight, and I can certainly tweak the goal. The current RFQ that we just put out looking for services to give us a new capital assessment, they'll be clear that they'll do a 10-year modeling, but the years that are the hardest in terms of rough order of magnitude and need are the first 5 to 7. Like, and then after that, your data starts to break down around cost impacts, and it's been 7 years of more things that happen in your district that might move things around and bring other things in front of things. But we got a really good 7-year run out of the DRA report that we were given on capital assessment, but it's now tapped out in terms of its capacity to give us direction, which is why we're doing a new one. So I don't disagree with you. They're just clear that, yes, you'll have like 5 strong years and then 5 softer years of trajectory, and there's more movement in those, but they will, when they bring that to us, provide. The town is looking to do a 10-year one as well. Yeah. They want a longer modeling system. It's just anybody that does that capital work will tell you that the second 4 to 5 years are looser by nature. Even if you look at how I do my strategic plan, it's a 5-year plan, but I give you 3 years, and then I keep rolling the next set of goals in against how other ones escalate against it. That's just my opinion, but I'm sure Steve will have insights.
Steve, you have a thought?
Yeah, the only issue here is that whether or not you can have a plan that rolls year over year and be able to fund it. One of the things that I think we all know is that we can have proposals that are brought to the town, and the town then operates on those based on what its needs are at that point in time. I mean, one of the things about long-term planning and spending is the town just doesn't have enough money in any year to go around. And so what that does, if the last thing that gets funded are either the capital or maintenance programs for whichever side of the budget we're talking about, whether it's the town or the schools, then the program that you put together to say, okay, in year 1, we're going to do X, in year 2, we're going to do Y, then everything gets pushed out, year over year. And the program, although it's good to list things that need to be done in order, I'm not sure that, quote, having an annual cycle is the way that it gets done. It's almost more risk and benefit to early versus later types of maintenance and repair or capital expenditures, mainly because the system that we work in here isn't like any other system. Because what finally happens is the town meeting decides what you're going to fix and what you're not. So I don't know. I think that might be a question to put to the consultants, given the fact that we have what we have as a budget cycle and a need for money that is a reactive rather than contemplative method. Maybe there's a better answer as to how they do it. I don't know.
I mean, I think that's kind of some of the discussion that we want to, and why it's on our kind of goal focuses, because I think those are the questions being asked by everybody on all the key boards as we look at the framework for wanting to understand. I was just looking to see if Mike was still here, and he is. I think, yes, and I know Kim Foster and Christy and all of us, as we've looked at this, know that they want to get a stronger plan that doesn't move around as much, that they can lock those numbers in, given that they can't have it be the last piece funded and based upon it pushing against a number versus a need. And I'm not articulating that well, but that's the range of conversation. And I think, if we know a roof cycle is going to come in, or a library is going to come in, or that getting a trajectory where we're looking at all of them and trying to map them out so we can lock them in and know the hard number that we kind of think we're going to be working off of. They think they would get a better rotation that would be less impacted, as Steve has just articulated, by this sense of you got to back into a number and then projects drop off whether you need them or not, and then you get into an emergency cycle. So those are all the range of conversations. I think what's good is that we're at the table. There's a good committee. Steve's on that committee. They're doing good work. We'll get fresh data, and that will help us to be good participants in the conversation, however it goes.
I like the rest of them. And the management and operations section, by the way.
Okay.
I think they're right on target.
My only comment is whether it's 5 years or 10 years. I mean, if we could have a 5-year plan and we could go into a year saying, okay, for example, Armstrong roof needs to be replaced, and if it gets voted down and then we end up in an emergency situation because the roof failed, what good it is. We need to be realistic on saying, okay,
Right.
whatever planning we do is to prevent emergency funding kicking in. So we need to be confident, we need to be able to say to the town that this is otherwise you'll end up in an emergency situation.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I think we've seen a range of experiences, but I also think, there are towns where that's exactly what does happen, is buildings fall apart and horrible facilities are allowed to deteriorate and not be effective for use. And so those are choices community makes. We, being in a functionally well-organized community with a strong set of boards and municipal employees, have effectively managed and accepted the responsibility of maintaining our buildings and our needs at a very high level. If you look at the overall number of buildings, yes, we've got things we need to do, and the ticket number of those is big, and that's the challenge we face as a community. But the quality of the town decision-making has cared for responding to our enrollment needs and renovating and supporting, at this point, 4 of our 6 buildings effectively, and similarly, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 6 municipal buildings on the town side. So the rotation has been robust. We have done a lot to care for our buildings. The town has done this building and the fire station and town hall, and they're rotating through their need of their additional buildings. So I think it is part of the process, but I believe we live in a town that has made really good decisions.
I would just comment that the only reason I think we got the money for Armstrong when we did is because there's buckets on the floor, but Hastings roof is just as bad. Its life cycle is a whole roof length of time beyond when it should have been fixed. And as I said, I mean, these maintenance jobs have been, at least included in discussions that we've had, not necessarily at town meeting because it didn't get that far, but there's certainly nothing wrong with having a report that comes up with what's needed in what order. I'm just saying that it's kind of tough when the money's not available to do it when it needs to be done, rather than when it becomes an emergency, as Armstrong did. So I think I'm agreeing with everybody here, but I think I'm also cognizant of the reality of our process. It is what it is because that's the way it has to be.
Yeah.
So, and the bottom line of this is that once we have, a consultant's report, as we did with the DRA report, we can continually bring those studies and outcomes before the town so that at least the evaluation of them in a timely fashion occurs.
Right.
So they're not out of sight, out of mind. They do
No,
get the true review against all other opportunities that have to be done in any given year.
Right. It will give us a fresh set of numbers for a clean sort of a strong shuffle of what needs to be done in priority order. So anyway, obviously that's why these are goals. See, look at that. That's a good one. Obviously I should be working on that one. So those are ones where, again, my focus will be to be supportive, across the range of the parts of my skill set where I can be, and to bring together smarter people than me to work on those pieces that are not my skill set. I'm not an engineer, and, so again, we do those pieces as needed. So I will take these. You don't need, there's a first reading, and I appreciate the feedback. If other things occur to you, like, oh, why isn't you working on this? There's a lot of other things I do that aren't in here. These are targeted focus areas for my work. I think it's important that, people don't think that I'm not doing other pieces, but it's important to know the areas where I feel like I'm putting emphasis. So that's what I'm planning this year.
Did you want to read through those last two or standards?
I thought I did. Hold on, let me open them.
This
Which
family
ones didn't I give
community
you?
engagement. Did I miss that?
Collaborate with the town organizations and review communications and extend the ways that I'm working to provide information, to cross over from families to more town communication where possible. I did read those quickly, sorry. I think I got them.
Took us back.
I'm sorry, I took us back.
No, it's
I
okay.
apologize.
It's all right. It's over.
We're moving on.
All right.
We're moving on
there
to
you
our
go.
next agenda item, which is the Massachusetts Association of School Committee Member Resolutions Review. This is our first read-through, and it's under your review for the next couple of weeks before our next meeting, where we will vote at our next meeting. And that vote will allow our Vice Chair, Steve Durrett, to represent the votes that we complete at the Massachusetts Association of School Committees Fall Conference. So that's just a reminder. And so basically, we're going to go through the 6 resolutions that have come forward from the this association. I'm going to read through them, and we can discuss them after I've read through. I'm going to read through all 6, and I will read them fully. Oh, do you want to discuss between? I think we do one. Okay, we'll do one at a time.
What is your plan for reading them? Because the whereases get very tiresome.
I know, but I think it's required that I read all of it, except for the rationale.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think therefore be it resolved, which is the action of what they're doing. The rest of it is the discussion as to how come they come to this conclusion. It's just that we'll be here all night if you read the whole.
Wherever you're allowed.
I defer to the former chair.
But I'm supposed to remember what I did. I do believe that since we are posting them on the screen, they are accessible to anyone who wants to read through them. So we
Could just skip to the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Okay.
Okay.
Well, there we go. We've got a memory here as well. So Resolution 1, it is regarding sanctuary laws for transgender students. It was sponsored by Lexington School Committee and 5 other school committees co-sponsored it, or 4. So therefore, be it resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls on the Great and General Court to join with other states in the passage of so-called, quote, sanctuary, unquote, laws to ensure such children and their families have, quote, the power of enjoying in safety and tranquility their natural rights and the blessings of life, unquote, as guaranteed by the Constitution of the Commonwealth. So that is number 1. Should we have discussion between? Does anyone have any comments about that one? Or you want to think about it over the next 2 weeks? Okay, we're moving on to resolution number 2, to increase the maximum balance allowed by the Special Education Reserve Fund. How appropriate is this one? So close to home. Sponsored by Plimpton School Committee. Therefore, it be resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls upon the Massachusetts Legislature to amend Chapter 40, Section 13E by deleting, quote, 2% of the annual net school spending, unquote, and by inserting the following, quote, 5% of the annual net school spending, unquote. That is really up our alley because that is exactly what our warrant article is about.
Yeah, they say it.
It's about, this is really about creating a special education reserve fund in the municipal government for exactly what we found are unanticipated costs that came forward.
I found what was fascinating in the rationale is it says it would allow for deeper investment of the municipality's own monies towards preventing mid-year budget crisis and positioning the school district to have the ability to provide the appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment for all students. So here we are, not even in the middle of the school year. But it makes sense that it would be allowable for a school district to, in essence, save more money to offset these costs that come up.
Any other thoughts?
We are meeting the expense
Yes, Bert.
one way or the other, right?
Right.
Well,
What
we're
impact
we're
does
forced to.
this has?
Well,
Yeah.
But what's going on with the process so far is that the impact of it would cause chaos in our process to have to do it, continue to do it this way with things that are created, if you will, at the state level and dumped on the town. You know, anything that allows us to have an ability to meet unexpected expenses is beneficial to the town as well as, you know, to the taxpayers. Because once the budget's set, you really don't want to have it upset by virtue of things that you couldn't figure out. I remember in my time on the school committee, when there was a budget shortfall in the state of significant amount of money, and what they did to solve the problem at state level was take money away from the town, which turned out to be taken away from the school budget. And so sometime, I don't know when it was, in November, maybe, when basically the money was withdrawn and we couldn't pay the salary of the staff that we had on board. And the impact of that was, I forgot how many teachers had to be laid off. And it took an awful long time to be able to rebuild the budget to be able to pay for staff. And so, you know, without some kind of a stabilization fund, the things that we just talked about earlier tonight happen. You know, and as I said in earlier discussions about budgeting, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, everybody, the municipality as well as the school district, has to have a balanced budget. You can't end the year on a deficit. So other states do. Illinois, for example, does. They have a $55 billion shortfall in Illinois that will never be paid off because they can spend more money than they have. So, you know, one of the things I guess I'll just comment on is that this year's resolutions by the MASC actually seem to be pretty good. They're not as far out as ones in the past have been. So
Been very
I
interesting.
think this is good.
Steve Batchelor.
A question about this. This is for the superintendent. It references the reserve fund having already been allowed. So does WPS already have one? And if so, has it been funded at 2%?
No, we don't. It's not, we're not set up like that.
Okay.
There are some
So
districts.
even though there's a possibility for this reserve fund already existing,
So
WPS has chosen not to?
yeah, no, I appreciate it. So the delineation of a reserve fund would be like establishing a targeted, clear revolving account, which we have a series of, if I understand the resolution correctly. And again, I kind of wait until I see all this play out. I haven't studied this one at all. So this is your list, and I don't really dive into it too much, to be honest. So I haven't like read it in depth. The delineation of allowing us to do the 3 month of prepay, which is allowable by state law, has functioned in the same mechanism for us as a stabilization fund. However, it's capped against 3 months of whatever your total tuition is. I would imagine, I'd have to do the calculations to see whether or not it would raise the allowable amount against total costs. Like, I would have to look at the numbers for us, but the answer is yes, we have been able to maintain, and we kept 100,000 for many years set aside as a stabilization fund, but the number is 2% of your total allocation. You have to look at the cost allocations to be able to look at like what would that number be, and how to set it up. There are some communities that have absolutely no buffer plan at all. We have had that 3 month prepay, which has covered for us and functioned as a stabilization. And the amount that is available year to year to make available to pay that, varies against other budget issues.
Yeah, this happens in all the time. I mean, 5.5 years ago, I watched a Sharon School Committee meeting where they had 2 students coming on, and it was going to cost $500,000, and it was the start of their budget. It was really challenging. These are challenging times of what to do about, and no fault of anybody. It's just part of, it would be nice if the state took some responsibility about recognizing state law and funding it.
It's not, and I think all municipalities have to have different, both on the school side and on the town side, different structures that allow them to be responsive. I forget what the name of it is. Mike might remember. There's the fund that we hold aside where we have to hold a portion of tax available to pay if the businesses contest their taxes, right? So you have to hold a certain percentage. It sits there, it's available, and they utilize that at a time of need. This is the state looking at a similar function and trying to get more consistency across districts. I think typically what happens is that districts that have been fiscally sound and communities that are well run, of which I consider us one of those, are able to work collaboratively and manage funding such that, like the town knew, we held that 100,000 that we've had, that we utilize that prepay structure to let us be responsive to special ed changes. Not all communities have that. The other thing is that many communities have made the selective choice that they expect to see that annual request at their fall town meeting. So we looked at a couple where, like, you vote your budget, if you have a change, you come back at fall and you make the request, as we are. This feels very different for us because that's not our annual process, but in some communities, that was the annual process they used. When I was speaking to a range of other superintendents, that they were like, no, we have an annual return for the difference against the deficit. So it's just a different practice than we've leveraged. I think it's better to have a stabilization fund because the sense of emotional volatility around that creates is really, I don't think, your best budgeting approaches. Like it is similarly to the stabilization fund for the taxation contesting. Like, you wouldn't want to be like calling a special town meeting or having to wait till the fall to see if those could be, raised and appropriated. Those types of things just create fiscal turmoil for people.
Okay. So we'll move on to Resolution 3, membership of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, submitted by the Arlington School Committee. Therefore, be it resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls for the enactment of legislation to repeal the provision of Massachusetts law that prohibits practicing educators and sitting school committee members from serving on the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. Be it further resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls for legislations to reconstitute the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education by including members with expertise as licensed educators and members with expertise in public school governance. I think this is a direct, personally, I think this is a direct reaction to the years of COVID, where the governance of DESE did not allow school committee members to be on their board. And who better to be on the board but education experts? So there was this pushback upon, that's where I think this is coming from. What does anyone else think? What do you think?
Well, I agree with you. I think what we saw was that DESE, based on the staff they had, was reacting to politics without necessarily considering what their decisions would be and how they would be reacted to by school districts and school staff. And so it's certainly logical that, in fact, those that are going to be governed should be part of the process. Seems like 1776 is repeated again and again, which is no taxation without representation. So
Seems that way.
we'll
Well,
see
you
how it
also
plays
have,
out.
you have receivership, you have other things. You remember one of
Yeah,
300.
well, we get to the receivership in the next one.
Right. There's so many dynamics of layers, yeah.
I feel like I see this, I think this resolution comes up almost every year because I feel like it's something that MASC has been advocating for. But it's interesting, in one of their whereases, they say that the teaching profession is the only profession or trade in Massachusetts where the holders of a license are prohibited from serving on its governing board. That's fascinating.
That is.
Well, and the other side of the coin is,
yeah.
the people on the board are appointed by who, the governor? So to the extent that, that this prohibition doesn't make any real sense, because if there's a good person to be put on the committee, there's no reason why the governor should be prohibited from appointing a good person.
Right.
So,
So that leads us to resolution number 4, which is preserving local governance of Massachusetts schools. And no surprise here, but it was sponsored by the same school committee, Arlington, which says, therefore, be it resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to restore local governance and accountability for the Lawrence, Holyoke, and Southbridge Public Schools no later than July 1st, 2023. And be it further resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls on the Massachusetts legislature to enact a legislation to limit any future takeovers to a term of no more than 3 years. Again, it's a rearrangement of power back to schools from the state.
well, back to school committees as well.
School committees and, yeah,
The power is taken away from the school committee during receivership, and
Right.
then there's no evidence that shows that the receivership actually helps academic improvement or any sort of improvement in the schools.
what's nice about this one, I think, is that Arlington, a group of school committee members all get together and they create these resolutions every year. Arlington must have represented and said, we're going to protect those schools that are in receivership, and said, we're going to find a resolution that helps bring back the control to school committees and puts a limit on the receivership or the takeovers.
Well, I mean, arguably, if a receivership couldn't get it done in that time, and yet they blamed the school district for not getting it done, then they're not
Yeah,
doing
you
any
blame the
better.
state for the
So
same
if they
problem.
can't get in and get it done and get out, then they weren't doing any better effectively than the other district was. So
Yeah.
it's a reasonable window for benchmarking data.
Yeah.
And it does say that in the whereases and the, exactly what you just said. Yeah, they couldn't get it done. Any other thoughts? Okay, Resolution 5. Oh, I feel like I've definitely, oh, thank you, Dave Gordon. It's sponsored by the Framingham School Committee. Resolution 5 is the financial literacy education. Oh, my God. Love this. Sorry. Did I say that out loud? Therefore, it be it resolved that Mask file legislation that would have the effect of ensuring that all students have exposure to personal financial literacy curricula and ultimately graduate from high school with the lifelong knowledge of how to be fiscally responsible to avoid being deterred by financial woes. This legislation should ensure that the students at various levels would benefit from curriculum in Massachusetts public schools, which would include content in personal financial literacy. Is there more? Yes, no. There's a rationale.
Yes,
But we've
I'd
been
like to
talking
hear
about
from
this.
our student on this.
Oh, please, Aritrika, please,
Yeah.
please announce this one.
I was gonna say that, like, I know at Westborough High we have an elective as personal finance, and a lot of students have benefited from that. They've had a good experience there. I guess my question would be, is this, like, I'm confused as to whether they're saying that this is gonna be a requirement for all students to take, or whether this is an option that's gonna be accessible to students.
It's saying a requirement.
Right.
And if you notice that the Westborough Public Schools only allows 9th or 10th graders to take this elective. And so if you're in 11th and 12th grade and you finally have an elective available to you, you don't even have the option of this one. And we have put this on the strategic plan as well. It's part of the strategic plan, isn't it?
So, yes and no. Curriculum is always on there. So here's the thing. If Aritrika's mind is working like mine, you know you have a very tight dance card when you're building your repertoire of classes that you want to take. And so if it's a choice between calculus or finances or AP history and other meaningful electives, the dance card has to be really strategically designed, and it's a tight set of slots. So I certainly can be in support of the conceptual framework, and I know we're not discussing all of this now, but I would be looking to the framework of implementation, because what I want to see is what are the targeted learning goals you want. I might break them out across other math or social history courses, dependent upon where the most appropriate place to delineate them is. It doesn't say it all has to happen in one class. It doesn't. So I want control. I might take those set of stranded learning goals and break them out across coursework. That arguably that's where Daniel and I would work with the high school to start to have a discussion around a requirement that would come in. So I would have concerns about setting aside pulling it out of an elective and having to require it, given how hard those choices are. But again, the high school would work with us on that. So just to kind of complicate your thinking on it.
I would, sorry.
Oh, no. Go ahead,
I was
Aritrika.
gonna say that, like, I would agree, especially as a 9th and 10th grader, when you have required prerequisites already, that, like, I know freshman year, you're probably taking a PE class and you're taking your health class, and they're both required, so that really leaves you with one elective spot. And for most students, if they do some kind of a fine arts, that takes up the entire both semesters, or if they have an academic class, that would do the same. A lot of students interested in pursuing business tend to take the personal finance class, but I've heard from them that they've gotten not only academically a lot from it, but from, like, a personal standpoint, which I think is reasonable, because finance in college and everything like that, making sure that students have a good understanding of that's really important, considering the current affordability concerns around higher education. I would agree that it would need to be a discussion with the school. I know we're not having the discussion right now, but perhaps opening it up to higher grades, because I know as a senior, your schedule is a lot more flexible as to you have more elective options open and things like that.
Steve Durrett?
Yeah, well, we, the school committee in past years, understood the conundrum that's causes kids to have to make judgment choices as to what courses you're going to take in order to go to the school you want. So what we did in lieu of the kinds of discussion that this thing requires is created the bank within the school. So that in fact, there's an opportunity to work there as well as be part of that process. So that there is some understanding of how do you write a check? How do you conserve your money? What do you do with money that's in your pocket? And the whole idea of it was once you get into that system, you sort of learn, you bootstrap yourself into at least being functional in terms of what happens when you go to school, you know, creating a checking account, a savings account, and having perhaps even a credit card that's likely funded by your parents, but still the opportunity to be able to function in today's society. And of course, it gets even worse when it's now electronic. And part of that training is simply to, if it is electronic, to be able to protect your assets so somebody doesn't steal them from you. When my father died, my mother had no idea how to write a check. She had really no understanding of money and where it went. Why? Because my father never actually created the opportunity for her to know. And so what we were hopeful for when we created these things in the high school is the opportunity for kids to participate, at least at that level. I certainly understand what you're saying, that, but on the other hand, if there's an interest, maybe there could be something supplied after school. That's maybe let's call it a short course or a summary kind of course. Maybe even where it's a document that you take home and read, just something. Because if you want to, and you feel you have a need, we should make it possible for you to be able to find what you need easily.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. I think it's really important, especially like if we even wanted to do it in a topic-specific kind of way. Say we have for seniors specifically, if we might have a FAFSA training of some sort, and that just be kind of a topic-based kind of like program, rather than necessarily putting it completely into our school curriculum, if that takes away from choosing other electives that people might want to take. But I agree, especially things like filling out a W-2, knowing what a tax form is. Like the first time I saw one of those forms, I went straight to my dad and I said, "What do I do with this?" So
Suffer.
yeah, so I was just like, and I still get forms from work, and I'm like, okay, I'll sign it. But so I think understanding those things are really important because many high schoolers work, and understanding what's the most reliable way to be financially literate, I think is.
I have a suggestion. Put that out as a query to the school population. What would you like to have as far as financial planning? And how could it work for you?
I think something important would be for seniors as part of when we meet with our counselors and everything, we have like senior specific meetings. So more recently, counselors right now are doing senior meetings, which are college planning meetings. And although we do disclose if we are or are not planning to request financial aid with our counselors, there isn't much guidance as towards how the FAFSA process works, and it's a very confusing process. So I think awareness around that is really important. You know, I think it's something like 98% of our graduates go to higher education, so it's very relevant to our school. So I think having some kind of topic-specific program on FAFSA would be important, and I would say possibly if we wanted to do something geared towards students planning to work, towards like what does the W-2 mean and how do you manage payment, that could be something there. I think the reason why I'm thinking topic-specific trainings or programs might work better than whole curriculum is that I don't think every student needs all of the information, but if they need certain things, they can choose what they need based on their personal situation.
And there is the Juniors Day, which might be an option. The Juniors Day, where we have college admissions come in, there are a lot of workshops, could be a possible workshop. Community education could be a possibility. And then putting it through the curriculum gradually over a K through 12 process so that you're not putting it all in one spot, because eventually everyone will have a job and have to read their tax forms and FAFSA and credit cards and have a pretty good understanding by the time they reach 12th grade. And I mean, like you said, there's only so much time in a day.
Right. I mean, I think for you guys and where you want to start is you need to make sure that whatever this resolution becomes and what you vote doesn't get in the way of all that flexibility you're looking for. So to the
Couple of
point of the
comments.
first step is make sure that you have that.
Yeah, a couple of comments on the FAFSA. I had trouble filling in FAFSA, so.
Me too. Yeah.
But there were a lot of YouTube videos that really helped me to understand so what they were asking for, and that that's one way of knowing and they were pretty well explained YouTube videos, so that could be a way where you could just put on those YouTube videos and it's self-explanatory and it's well explained. That could be one way. And the other one is, why is, just for my own understanding, why is personal finance limited to 8th and 9th, is it?
9th and 10th.
9th and 10th, not 11th and 12th.
I don't want to, we teach money all across curriculum, so it's a trajectory of strands of mathematics. So again, I think I wouldn't want to feel like we're like out in the weeds now. I kind of would like to draw us back. I'm really happy, but I would like to do that in a way where I can bring you organized information.
Okay.
Answer a set of key targeted questions.
Yeah.
You're talking about if people are watching, they get very confused. So if we have a meandering conversation around mathematics at 8:20 at night, I don't believe it serves the purposes of the public schools. So I'm gonna draw us back in.
Bring us right back in. There is a resolution that is asking about personal financial literacy education being mandatory, and that is what the resolution is really for. And so it did bring us into the discussion about our own district and I thought it was a good conversation. And it also, the 5 that we've had have allowed us to have the discussion now versus later when we go to have the vote.
Yes.
Yes?
I suggest that David present to us next time what the finance committee, what the school committee in Framingham was thinking when they put it on here.
Oh, that would be really good. Okay. So
Poor David.
Yeah, we'll ask Dave.
We're moving on to resolution number 6, establishment of a regional school assessment reserve fund. Therefore, be it resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees calls upon the Massachusetts Legislature to enact or amend legislation which permits municipalities to establish a regional school assessment reserve fund. And it proposes language for, laws and municipalities and percentages, which affects regional school districts. And it was sponsored by the Silver Lake Regional School Committee.
And although it says regional, it actually affects us as well because we have a budget that supports the regional school system based on the number of employees, the number of students we send versus the total. So, our assessment has a minimum that we have to pay. So the fact that they could very well come back to us someday and say, hey, they have perhaps the same problem that we just talked about earlier tonight, where their budget gets upset and they need to ping each one of the towns that support them. So it is to our benefit that that even the regional district have an opportunity to have a reserve fund that will help them meet their budget requirements.
Okay, well, we're moving on to, first of all, the next regular session meeting of the school committee is scheduled for Thursday. Notice I said Thursday, October 6th, because Wednesday there is no school a week from next Wednesday. So do we have a motion to move into executive session?
Sure, I can make a motion to meet in executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, administrators union, teachers union, and under MGL, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to review and approve executive session minutes from September 7th, 2022.
I think we also have to add in that motion that we will not do any other business after we come out of executive session except to adjourn.
Right.
We'll adjourn
We
directly
declare
from
that the
executive
open
session.
meeting would be a
Thank you.
detrimental effect on the board's bargaining negotiations positions. Second from Steve, thank you. Is there any other discussion? Roll call vote.
Bachelor, yes.
Vincent, yes.
Edinburgh, yes.
London absent.
Direct, yes.
Okay, we are now in executive session. I invite everyone to now exit the room unless you have been invited to attend this executive session.